The topic we'll cover is Waterfall Stakeholder Management. The process is used to identify, engage, and monitor stakeholders to ensure their expectations are managed and their support is secured. In predictive projects, this begins with identify stakeholders. The project manager develops a stakeholder register that includes names, roles, level of influence, power, interest, and expectation. This register becomes the foundation for planning and managing engagement throughout the project. The next step is planned stakeholder engagement, where the project manager creates an engagement plan tailored to the needs, interests, and influence of stakeholders. This plan outlines how the team will build and maintain relationships and how communication will be structured. During execution, the project manager must manage stakeholder engagement. This involves actively communicating, managing expectations, resolving issues, and gaining buy-in. It is about ensuring that stakeholders remain aligned with project objectives and supportive of project outcomes. The process of monitor stakeholder engagement ensures that engagement strategies are working. The project manager continuously assesses engagement levels and updates strategies as needed, adapting to changes in stakeholder attitudes or project circumstances. For the exam, you should be familiar with models and tools that help prioritize and assess stakeholders. The Stakeholder Salience Model prioritizes stakeholders based on their power, legitimacy, and urgency. The Engagement Assessment Matrix compares current engagement levels with desired levels, such as moving a stakeholder from resistant to supportive. Predictive projects face unique challenges. Because stakeholders often engage primarily at key milestones, there is a greater risk of late dissatisfaction if their needs are not well understood or managed early on. Conflict resolution in predictive projects frequently requires more formal escalation and negotiation by the project manager rather than informal resolution. Another challenge is change resistance. Predictive projects often deliver outputs that require integration into existing operations, so organizational change management is critical to ensure adoption and sustained value. Finally, communication in predictive environments typically relies on structured reports, formal sign-offs, and hierarchical updates rather than informal or iterative feedback cycles. So, predictive stakeholder management is about identifying stakeholders, planning and managing engagement with structured strategies, monitoring effectiveness, and addressing challenges like resistance and formal conflict resolution. Now we'll go through 10 practice questions that test your knowledge of stakeholder registers, engagement planning, prioritization models, and the communication strategies used in predictive projects. Let's get into our first question on this topic. Question 101. During project initiation, the project manager learns that the head of compliance, who is not part of initial planning discussions, has a strong interest in ensuring the project adheres to regulatory guidelines. What should the project manager do next? A. Schedule recurring meetings to gather ongoing input from the compliance lead. B. Record her details in the stakeholder register and assess her level of influence. C. Assign her as the compliance lead in the responsibility assignment matrix. D. Update the stakeholder engagement plan to reflect her concerns. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of stakeholder identification, a foundational step in predictive project environments. Stakeholders must first be formally documented and analyzed before any engagement or planning can occur. Choice B is the best option because the stakeholder register is where the project manager first captures information such as name, role, interest, influence, and expectations. This step comes before engagement planning or role assignment. Choice A is incorrect. While setting up communication is a good idea, it should follow after the stakeholder is properly identified and assessed in the register. Choice C is incorrect. Assigning her in the RACI matrix is premature before formally identifying and analyzing the stakeholder's role and authority. Choice D is incorrect. Updating the stakeholder engagement plan skips the critical first step of adding her to the stakeholder register and performing a basic analysis. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 102. While planning stakeholder engagement for a waterfall project, the project manager notices that some influential stakeholders are resistant, while others are unaware of the project. What should the project manager do next? A. Use a general stakeholder engagement strategy to reduce planning complexity. B. Engage resistant stakeholders and send more frequent updates to those unaware of the project. C. Develop tailored strategies to move each stakeholder toward their desired engagement level. D. Hold a kickoff meeting to address all stakeholder concerns. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is C. This question tests your ability to apply a nuanced approach to stakeholder engagement planning. In predictive environments, stakeholder strategies should be intentional, structured, and adapted to each stakeholder's power, interest, and current engagement level. Choice C is the best option because PMI recommends using tools like the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix to identify current versus desired levels and then develop customized strategies to close that gap. Choice A is incorrect. Using a general strategy may save time, but it ignores the fact that different stakeholders require different approaches, especially when some are resistant. Choice B is incorrect. This approach sounds proactive, but it addresses the symptoms, not the root cause. Simply increasing updates or engagement won't guarantee alignment unless the strategy is customized. Choice D is incorrect. A kickoff meeting may help raise awareness, but it is only one tactic and doesn't replace the need for a comprehensive engagement plan. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 103. Midway through a predictive project, two influential stakeholders, one from compliance and the other from operations, have begun providing conflicting feedback on key deliverables. The compliance lead insists on additional documentation not in the original scope, while the operations manager is frustrated by the resulting delays. The tension is starting to impact team morale and schedule commitments. What should the project manager do? A. Bring both stakeholders together to discuss their concerns during the next team meeting. B. Ask the team to prioritize the compliance changes to avoid regulatory risks. C. Request that both stakeholders document their concerns in writing for the next governance review. D. Meet privately with both stakeholders to clarify expectations and reinforce project objectives. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is D. This question tests how well you manage stakeholder engagement when interests conflict and the project is under stress. In waterfall environments, engagement isn't just about pushing information. It's about resolving misalignment early and proactively. Choice D is the best option because meeting privately with both stakeholders gives the project manager a chance to understand concerns in a controlled environment and refocus both parties on the project's goals. It helps preserve relationships and prevents conflict from escalating further. Choice A is incorrect. While a joint discussion may seem reasonable, doing so in a team meeting risks escalating tensions in front of others without resolving the root issue first. Choice B is incorrect. Prioritizing one stakeholder's request, even if it seems risk-based, undermines balanced engagement and can alienate other key stakeholders. Choice C is incorrect. Deferring the conflict to a governance review delays resolution and may lead to further team disruption or project delays in the meantime. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 104. You are managing a waterfall project and notice that a previously supportive stakeholder has become unresponsive. They've stopped attending review meetings and are no longer replying to emails. You want to address the issue methodically using the project's existing plans. What should the project manager do first? A. Reduce the volume of communications to minimize stakeholder fatigue. B. Review the Stakeholder Engagement Plan and update engagement strategies as needed. C. Contact the stakeholder directly to ask why they've disengaged. D. Adjust upcoming communications to match the stakeholder's preferred format and tone. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question is testing your understanding of the predictive approach to stakeholder engagement, specifically how to respond when a stakeholder shows signs of disengagement. The key phrase in this question is methodically using the project's existing plans. Choice B is the best option because, in a waterfall environment, PMI recommends starting with your plans. The Stakeholder Engagement Plan outlines how each stakeholder should be engaged, how often, and through which channels. If a stakeholder has become unresponsive, the first step is to verify whether your plan was adequate or needs to be updated. This ensures your next actions are informed and aligned with the project's governance. Choice A is incorrect. Reducing communication without investigating the root cause may worsen the issue and doesn't reflect a structured or informed approach. Choice C is tempting but not correct as the first step. While directly reaching out to the stakeholder is useful, the predictive approach emphasizes plan-based analysis before interpersonal engagement. You need to confirm whether your strategy was appropriate before contacting them. Choice D is incorrect. Tailoring communication sounds proactive, but it assumes the stakeholder's preferences without validating them through the engagement plan. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 105. During a predictive project, a stakeholder who was previously uninvolved suddenly escalates a complaint to the steering committee, demanding immediate changes to a critical deliverable. The stakeholder has formal authority, a valid business concern, and insists on resolution before the next milestone. What should the project manager do? A. Submit a change request to the CCB while continuing work on current deliverables. B. Prioritize the stakeholder due to the combination of power, legitimacy, and urgency. C. Reassess the stakeholder's role and adjust their influence level in the Stakeholder Register. D. Acknowledge the concern and schedule time to discuss it in the next Stakeholder Review session. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of stakeholder prioritization using the Stakeholder Salience Model, which considers three factors: power, legitimacy, and urgency. Choice B is the best option because the stakeholder in this case demonstrates all three attributes: formal authority, power; a valid concern, legitimacy; and time sensitivity, urgency. According to PMI, such stakeholders must be prioritized immediately, even if they've only recently engaged. Choice A is incorrect. While submitting a change request to the CCB is part of the process, delaying direct engagement with a highly salient stakeholder while continuing other work risks damaging relationships and missing critical input. Choice C is incorrect. Adjusting the Stakeholder Register might be helpful, but it does nothing to address the urgency of the complaint or the stakeholder's current expectations. Choice D is incorrect. Deferring the conversation to a later meeting fails to acknowledge the urgency and importance of the concern. Waiting is not an acceptable response in this case. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 106. You are managing a multi-year waterfall project for a government agency. Stakeholder engagement has been structured around predefined review stages. After a major design phase concludes, several stakeholders raise concerns that their feedback was not reflected in the final output, even though they were involved in earlier planning sessions. What challenge does this situation most likely reflect? A. Stakeholder feedback is often delayed due to long gaps between key milestones. B. Requirements were not properly baselined before moving into design. C. Change requests were not logged formally in the change control system. D. The communication plan lacked detailed instructions for stakeholder meetings. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is A. This question tests your understanding of a common stakeholder engagement challenge in waterfall projects: delayed feedback due to limited engagement points. Choice A is the best option because, in a waterfall lifecycle, stakeholders are typically engaged at structured checkpoints, like phase gate reviews or milestone meetings. Between these stages, weeks or months may pass, making it easy for stakeholders to feel their feedback is outdated or ignored by the time decisions are implemented. Choice B is incorrect. While requirements baselining is important, the scenario isn't about unclear or unapproved requirements. The issue here is more about the timing of stakeholder feedback, not requirement stability. Choice C is incorrect. The concern isn't about undocumented changes, it's that feedback didn't make it into the deliverables, likely because engagement came too late. Choice D is incorrect. The communication plan may have included the correct stakeholders and meeting details. The root problem is the delayed engagement structure, not missing logistics. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 107. A project manager is overseeing a predictive IT infrastructure project. During a stakeholder review, it becomes clear that a key stakeholder expected to be supportive has been actively opposing recent design decisions. The stakeholder was classified as supportive in the original engagement plan. What should the project manager do to address this discrepancy? A. Increase the stakeholders' involvement by including them in more meetings and decisions. B. Issue a change request to update the stakeholder register and seek sponsor input. C. Compare the stakeholders' current and desired engagement level, then revise the engagement strategy accordingly. D. Schedule a working session with the stakeholder to revisit their original requirements. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is C. This question is testing your understanding of how to manage engagement discrepancies in a structured, plan-driven way. PMI's preferred approach in a predictive environment is to treat stakeholder engagement like any other project element through analysis and planned adjustments. Choice C is the best option because the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix helps compare where a stakeholder currently is, resistant, neutral, supportive, versus where they need to be. Once that gap is identified, you can revise your strategy to shift their engagement level in a purposeful way. Choice A is incorrect. Increasing meeting participation might sound proactive, but without understanding the stakeholders' current concerns or tailoring your engagement strategy, it could worsen the situation. More exposure does not equal better engagement. Choice B is incorrect. Changes in stakeholder engagement don't necessarily require a formal change request unless project baselines are affected. This is a strategic engagement issue, not a change control issue. Choice D is incorrect. Reopening requirements assume the stakeholders' opposition is about scope, but this scenario is about engagement behavior, not missed deliverables. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 108. During the execution of a predictive IT modernization project, several senior engineers resist adopting a newly approved change request that updates system architecture. They argue that the original design was already approved and implementing the change will cause unnecessary rework. The sponsor insists that the change must be implemented immediately to meet compliance requirements. What should the project manager do next? A. Arrange a meeting between the senior engineers and the sponsor to discuss the reasons for the change and reach alignment. B. Meet with the engineers to understand their concerns and reinforce the rationale and benefits of the approved change. C. Proceed with implementing the change as directed by the sponsor and document the team's objections in the issue log. D. Negotiate a compromise with the senior engineers to minimize the change's impact on their current work. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of change resistance management in predictive projects, a scenario where strong personalities, technical resistance, and compliance requirements collide. Choice B is the best option because PMI emphasizes the use of organizational change management to understand resistance, reinforce the need for change, and guide adoption. The change has been approved, but instead of escalating or compromising, the project manager must lead engagement by listening, clarifying, and supporting the team's transition. Choice A is incorrect. Involving the sponsor in tactical friction at this stage is premature. The project manager should first attempt to address resistance directly before seeking executive alignment. Choice C is incorrect. While it respects the sponsor's directive, immediately forcing the change without resolving concerns risks morale and execution quality. Logging objections doesn't solve the root issue. Choice D is incorrect. Negotiating a compromise might sound diplomatic, but it undermines a formally approved change request, especially one driven by compliance. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 109. A predictive infrastructure project is behind schedule and the sponsor has expressed concern about delays during steering committee meetings. Meanwhile, several external stakeholders complain that they only learn about issues after decisions are already made. The project manager realizes that updates are mostly focused on executive-level audiences. What should the project manager do next? A. Update the communication plan to include timely updates and feedback loops for all key stakeholders. B. Send weekly progress summaries to all stakeholders to increase transparency. C. Meet with the sponsor to confirm which details should be shared with external parties. D. Develop a stakeholder engagement matrix to reassess influence and adjust future communication frequency. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is A. This question evaluates your understanding of stakeholder-focused communication planning in predictive projects, particularly how to address unbalanced information flow. Choice A is the best option because it reflects PMI's recommendation to maintain and revise the communications management plan as the project evolves. If certain stakeholders are not receiving timely information, the plan should be updated to add feedback mechanisms and ensure broader visibility across all key groups. Choice B is incorrect. While sending weekly summaries may improve visibility, a generic one-size-fits-all message won't meet the diverse needs of executive and external audiences. It doesn't address the systemic gap in communication strategy. Choice C is incorrect. Relying solely on the sponsor to filter communication decisions is not best practice. The project manager is responsible for planning and executing stakeholder communication. Choice D is incorrect. Reassessing influence is useful, but the issue here isn't stakeholder mapping, it's communication coverage. The engagement matrix won't fix incomplete updates. Let's move on to the next question if you're ready. Question 110. During the execution of a predictive ERP implementation project, several department managers express frustration that new processes are being introduced without sufficient preparation. The project followed all approved plans and issued formal communications before rollout, yet employees are resisting adoption and reverting to old systems. What should the project manager do next? A. Work with functional managers to reinforce the importance of following the new processes. B. Engage change champions within departments to gather feedback and address adoption concerns. C. Conduct additional formal training sessions to ensure all employees understand the new procedures. D. Update the communications plan to increase the frequency of implementation status updates. You can pause the video here if you need more time to work on the question. The correct answer is B. This question tests your understanding of organizational change management in predictive projects, especially how to handle late-stage resistance after rollout. Choice B is the best option because it reflects a proactive, people-focused strategy. Change champions help bridge the gap between leadership and frontline employees by addressing real concerns, collecting feedback, and building trust. Key elements of successful adoption, even in a plan-driven environment. Choice A is incorrect. Reinforcing top-down compliance without engagement can increase resistance. It lacks the empathy and dialogue required to understand the root causes. Choice C is incorrect. More formal training may help, but without understanding why resistance is happening, it may not be effective. This is treating symptoms rather than the root issue. Choice D is incorrect. Increasing communication frequency does not guarantee alignment or behavior change. Adoption issues require deeper interaction, not just more updates. You've now completed all 10 questions for stakeholder management in waterfall projects, bringing your total to 110 questions. If this video helped your PMP prep, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to PM Aspirant for more exam prep content. Let's continue when you're ready for the next topic.